As any of you who've watched my video on the games that I played last year would know, I decided to try out Rainbow Six Siege during the free weekend it had in mid-November, and I was enthralled by the creativity allowed by its design. While the game is definitely not perfect, I really enjoyed it a ton. You might also remember me saying that if there was any game I would buy PlayStation Plus for, it would probably be this one. Lo and behold, late in December, I ran across a sale where Siege was only $20, so I decided to do exactly that. Been playing it whenever I can, and yeah, still loving it. Obviously the game is quite different from what it was before, so a lot of the older reviews from big websites aren't really accurate representations of what the game is now. Nonetheless, I decided to take a look at them, just to see what people thought. One thing stuck out to me, which honestly left me absolutely disgusted. There was a frankly gross amount of talk about how the game suffers because of a lack of real single-player content. An argument that I not only think holds no water, but ignores realities the industry has presented to us for at least 2 decades. It also proposes the idea that monetary value is a universal, objective measurement, which it most certainly is not. What I feel is worth $60, others may not, and neither is wrong. Monetary value can only be gauged to a faux objective degree by comparing the content in the box. But that's only the utmost basic worth of a product. A painter may ask at least to be compensated for the price of the materials for the painting, but that doesn't mean said painting is only worth the price of the materials. Same with a game. It can be worth more for different people for different reasons, but I digress. The more important points I'd like to make are as such. Firstly, multiplayer-only games have been around for a long while, as I stated briefly in a previous video. Whether we're talking about Team Fortress 2, Counter-Strike, Unreal, Overwatch, Tribes, it doesn't matter. Implying that multiplayer-only games are wrong or lesser in some way, and giving people the impression that this is a new phenomenon designed to make more money while doing less work, that's dishonest. But more importantly, I think this is ethically dishonest journalism, because it's a complete failure to meet the game on its own terms. At that point, you are no longer judging the game for what it's trying to be, and are instead judging it based purely on what you, the social pressures around you, or whatever other external factors are telling you it needs to be. Like I've also stated before, this is why I don't subscribe to the notion that a game can be not Final Fantasy enough, or not Mega Man enough, or whatever. These types of statements are complete and utter failures to judge the game based on what it offers and the goals it's trying to reach. Instead, you're moving the goalposts for no other reason than to add credence to your subjective feelings, and make them feel more tangible in the process. You can argue that a game doesn't take advantage of the things that traditionally are the most interesting or unique parts of a series, like say if a Sonic game was focused purely on platforming instead of speed and physics, but this is not the same thing as saying a game isn't Sonic enough to be called a Sonic game. As an individual, you wouldn't want someone to judge you or your work based solely on outside factors, would you? So here's a good example. This is an illustration I'm working on right now. You may think it's amazing, you may think it sucks hard, but would it really be fair criticism if your reason for disliking it was that it was too anime or had too many female characters, or something ridiculous like that? Shouldn't it be judged for what it's trying to accomplish, rather than what you wish it would try to accomplish? And the thing is, this doesn't mean that objective facts can't be used to back up our critiques in order to offer a sturdier foundation. In fact, I would strongly argue that some amount of objectivity is required for a critical review to have any real merit. But we need to be more discerning when actually choosing what we claim is fact and what isn't. Review comes in multiple flavors though, and I think that's also important to discuss when talking about where the line should be drawn. For example, a lot of people think that Polygon's recent review of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is a disaster because it had the gall to give PUBG a 10 out of 10. Yes, I know, scores are meaningless and counterproductive the way we use them today, but let's humor this conversation because I think there's something important to be gleaned from it. First off, I must make clear that if I were to give PUBG a score, it definitely wouldn't be a 10 out of 10, out of sheer principle, since it's such an unoptimized mess that doesn't even function as intended 75% of the time, particularly on Xbox One. That, and as far as I understand, it's still in early access, so it shouldn't get final or scored reviews whatsoever, but regardless, I'm also coming at this from the perspective of a critical, analytical reviewer. The point of my discussion on a game is to break it down from a technical perspective, so if the game doesn't even work half the time, then it's an objective problem that I have to hold against it in order to be consistent. It doesn't mean this problem has to personally bother me, but I won't give it a pass if it affects the actual goals of the experience negatively. But Polygon and these other outlets aren't making critical, analytical reviews. They may feign deep, nuanced critique, but this isn't the goal of their consumer reviews. Their reviews, unlike mine, are more about informing like-minded consumers about whether they think a product is worth purchasing. They are information for before the fact. My reviews are information for after the fact, when you finish the game and want to know what other people think. They are information first, reflection second. To someone going to these reviews, this is about a purchasing decision. This is about finding information to help them decide whether a game like Elder Scrolls Oblivion is worth buying. It's not about the broken meta created by Oblivion's leveling system and how the balance it creates has cascading effects across the entire experience, ultimately running counter to the role-playing and kinetic action goals of the game. It's about whether people should buy it or not. This is the one perspective where I can agree with these outlets when they criticize a game like Rainbow Six for excluding a single-player campaign. To them and their like-minded consumers, the lack of a single-player campaign will affect their purchasing decision. To their like-minded consumers, PUBG ends up being a beautiful experience in spite of the problems it has, in spite of being unfinished. The important thing is that they don't cross the line from informing people with similar tastes into creating an echo chamber that validates more extreme lines of thought. So I still ultimately feel that it's harmful for the industry to treat this as if it's an objective failure on the part of the game to lack single-player content. I feel that crosses the line because whether one is judging the game as a consumer product to be bought or judging it as a piece of art to be dissected, getting the facts right is important, and excluding a single-player campaign from your game is not an objective problem if implementing a single-player campaign wasn't a goal. Rainbow Six Siege is not Rainbow Six Patriots, it's not Rainbow Six Vegas, it's not Rainbow Six Vegas 2, so don't treat it like it needs to be any of these games to be worthwhile. Some would counter this idea by arguing that this creates a bit of a false paradox with games where the intention is to create a bad product. Because one has to ask if the game is actually well designed, if it successfully meets the criteria of being poorly designed. Yes, duh, of course the answer is yes, obviously. It's no different than how you can create a parody of bad acting in a movie, like SNL does, and call it well acted in how poorly acted it is. The goals of the work make the difference. There is no real paradox here. The bottom line for me is that I think it's pretty harmful to put it into the heads of consumers that single player needs to exist if a game wants to be judged fairly. We did the same thing with multiplayer in the previous console generation, and what did we get? A lot of terrible multiplayer that was shoehorned in and a lot of compromised single player campaigns to go with them because development tools and such had to be optimized for two experiences that were potentially extremely distant in design. We did the same thing with open worlds, and now every game seems to be expected to be a massive, empty open world with nothing interesting to do. We're also doing the same thing with loot systems, which are being forced into experiences without much thought as to the impact it'll have, because loot systems are cool, right? Do we really want another half-baked narrative in a thoughtless corridor shooter just to say we have one? Why can't games like Siege just stand on their own? Other problems it may or may not have notwithstanding, of course. Keep in mind as a final thought that I'm not saying Siege and other games couldn't benefit from having a campaign. I could definitely see a rather amazing campaign being crafted around the tactical, team-focused co-op nature of its design. and Overwatch could probably get a great campaign too if it focused on the compelling characters in the lore. I just don't think it should be a requirement. What do you guys think though? Where do you believe the line should be drawn? And when do you personally think a review may go too far? Sound off in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you're interested in another one, here's the last one that I uploaded. You can also follow me on Twitter or subscribe by hitting the subscribe button.